Big Questions with the Dead Milkmen. So anyway, we're down in Florida, and Donnie says to Vlad, look, I can show you these documents, but you can't share them with the Iranians because they'll probably share them with Hezbollah. Oh, hi! I didn't see you all come in. So tonight on Big Questions with the Dead Milkmen, we are answering the question, what is the most influential live music performance of all time ever in the history of everything? Forever. Now, we will not be accepting the answer, the Sex Pistols at the Lesser Free Trade Hall, because that answer is boring. It's the one that people give who, no, we're not accepting that. Well, we would have accepted, by the way, DJ Kool Herc's August 11th, 1973 gig at 1520 Sedgwick Avenue in the Bronx. That's actually when and where hip-hop was invented. So now you know. All right, so I'm going to start off by saying occasionally, somebody takes a big boulder and they hurl it into the musical pond. There's a big splash. Everybody gets wet. And that's the new thing. For example, the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. They show up on Ed Sullivan and the next day, everybody has a stupid haircut. They're making crappy music. They talk like idiots. Or another example, one episode is just one episode of Quincy to create more punks than 1,000 Black Flag gigs ever did. But every now and then somebody tosses a pebble into that same musical pool, and it creates a ripple. And that ripple gets bigger and bigger, and it goes out and out, and it goes out forever. And that's what I'm talking about, because with that brilliant analogy, I would like to talk about Klaus Nomi's debut at the New Wave Vaudeville show at Irving Plaza in 1978. Now, I'm assuming if you're watching this show, you're probably familiar with who Klaus Nomi is. But if you don't know who Klaus Nomi is, you've got some homework to do, but it's fun homework. And who knows, we might have a science fair at some point, so you can bring in your Nomi experiment. But if you know who Nomi is, you might not have heard about New Wave Vaudeville. So I want to explain that to you. New Wave Vaudeville was, I think, a series of shows that ran over 4 days at Irving Plaza. And it was just a collection of bizarre acts. Ann Magnuson was one of the co-creators. And if you don't know who Ann Magnuson is, she's somebody else you're going to want to look up. She went around town with some other people, and they were putting up posters asking for things like, Egyptian slaves, robot monsters, geeks, emotional cripples, and they got them. And they got them in spades. The first night show included a singing dog act, a stripper, and some sort of S&M nun. It was supposed to be great. And the thing about it was the closer for each night was Klaus Nomi. And Klaus Nomi would come out dressed kind of like a spaceman. He had like a black outfit, and he would have a see-through plastic cape with a big hood. And he would come out and he would sing an aria from the opera Samson and Delilah. Now, fortunately, some genius had the foresight to film this. So you can see this as it went down live. We'll put up a link. It's out there on YouTube. Gherkins, you owe it to yourself to watch this. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. Klaus comes out and he starts the act, and the audience begins to laugh, hey, this is weird, this guy's weird. But they begin to realize something. He ain't lip syncing. He is singing along live to the recording of the aria. In fact, the MC of the show after each night would have to tell people that wasn't pre-recorded. That's actually him singing. And as he sings, and as the crowd begins to realize that he is singing, they go apeshit. They start freaking out. Ah! And then they would end Klaus's performance by setting off a bunch of smoke bombs, minor explosions. They had a lot of loud electronic noise, and Klaus would just step back into this chaos and disappear. Jody Arias, who worked with him, was also a famous New York artist, said it was like some alien had beamed down to Earth and had done his thing, and then his parents just called him home. Check it out. You'll be absolutely amazed. So Klaus does the New Wave Vaudeville, and then is an instant hit. He starts getting booked at the Mud Club, Max's Kansas City. He's playing pretty much every couple of weeks someplace. This, of course, gets the attention of one Mr. David Bowie, because nothing escaped the attention of David Bowie if it was cool. So out of nowhere, Klaus and Jody get this call. It's like, hello, this is David Bowie, and I'd like your help with something. My head would explode. They would still be picking up pieces of my brain off the sidewalk. Like, how is it that the most important human being who has ever lived calls you out of nowhere and says, I need your help with something? what Bowie needed their help with was a performance that he was going to be doing on Saturday Night Live. Now, Saturday Night Live, of course, would occasionally have some bad acts, but this was absolutely amazing. Now, some people say it was a musical performance. Other people say it was actually a ritual to end the 70s. But if you see it, and I saw it live, you'll never see anything like it. I was 16 years old when I saw it, and it changed my life forever. That's probably why I like a lot of weird, strange stuff thrown in with rock acts. Absolutely amazing. But here's the super amazing thing. This is only 13 months after Klaus Nomi made his debut. 13 months after he appears in front of a couple of dozen people at New Wave Vaudeville, he is appearing in front of millions of people standing next to David Bowie on a stage, being part of the act. I mean, that is mind-blowing. Just don't expect that to ever happen again. So what happens is, for the general public, this is probably the first time they'd ever seen like weird arty rock. But the thing is, it's still with us today. If you go see IMX or you go see Bestial Mouths, there's still a bit of that Klaus Nomi. You can feel the DNA. And this is the super odd thing. It's no longer just his like weird performance bit. It's no longer just for underground artists. And this is all thanks to something called the internet. None of you guys heard about the internet? A lot of people at home are probably going, well, the internet, Rodney, isn't that where poorly endowed right-wingers go to complain about cancel culture? Yes, it is. But it's also a place where you can learn stuff. And a lot of people learned about Klaus Nomi through the internet. For example, Lady Gaga and Courtney Act, who is, of course, on RuPaul's Drag Race, they both regularly dress like Klaus Nomi. At 2019 at Glastonbury, Kylie Minogue had a dancer dressed like Klaus Nomi right behind her. If you watch the last season, not this season, let's not talk about this season of American Horror Story. But if you watch the last season, the really, really good one, American Horror Story New York, they actually had a character based on Klaus Nomi. And this is amazing because, you know, he passed away 40 years ago. And it was back in 1983. It was back in 78 that he came out on this stage, sang an aria, and blew everybody's mind. And he's still in our cultural DNA. So this is why I believe that the most influential live performance of all time is, in fact, Klaus Nomi at New Wave Vaudeville, because it leads to him being on Saturday Night Live with Bowie. They come out and they do Man Who Sold the World, they do Boys Keep Swinging, and they do TVC-15, a song so far ahead of its time that if you were to release a video of it, let's say a cover of it in 2023, it would probably get hundreds of thousands of views. I had to sneak that in there. So yes, that is my argument for Klaus Nomi at New Wave Vaudeville being the most influential musical act of all time. And now I believe we go to Joseph.
I'm going to make a case that's earlier in time, in 1956, January 28th, and it takes place on television on a variety show aired on CBS called Stage Show, also known as the Dorsey Stage Show, hosted by the Dorsey brothers, Tommy and Jimmy, or Jimmy and Tommy, I don't know. Dorsey, they were leaders of a big band. And their ratings were starting to sink, and they were looking for a fresh act, something country, maybe country western or so, or according to the biography of Tommy Dorsey anyway. When he got a tip that there's this guy Elvis, and he was playing at the Louisiana Hayride. He was popular in the South, and that could help the ratings. They went and saw him play there and got Tom Parker to do a deal for 4 appearances. They eventually did 6 appearances on the stage show, and the first one was in January. He played 2 songs that were R&B songs, and that was unusual back then for a white person to be playing R&B songs. One of them was Shake, Rattle, and Roll, written by Jesse Stone, and I Got a Woman, co-written by Ray Charles. Tommy Dorsey is polite. Elvis is polite. According to the blog I read about this appearance, the the musicians were snickering at Elvis in rehearsal.
Like Klaus Nomi.
Huh?
Like Klaus Nomi.
And they thought he was crazy. People didn't. Elvis at the time was he was known to teenagers, but he wasn't known nationally, I guess. He was more known in the South. And he had some minor hits on the Sun Records label. His RCA first single didn't come out quite yet. But this performance, these two songs were a sensation. They generated tons of mail, a lot of it negative. And a lot of it had to do with Elvis's lusty gyrations. And they showed him, they didn't, this was before they just, later TV appearances, he would be, especially after this Milton Berle appearance, he would only be shown from the waist up. Basically, why I think it's influential is that it got him a lot of national attention, and by the time he did all of his appearances here, he had a #1. He also played Heartbreak Hotel on there and had a #1 with RCA Records, and you could say the rest is history, but he influenced a lot of other acts, and he kind of broke through. He made R&B eventually acceptable to a broader audience, the white audience. And I don't know, things were very segregated especially in the South back then. So yeah, I think he opened the door for what the rock and roll music that we know now today, a straight line through the Beatles and bands like that. Also, when you look at the timeline, January 28th is almost 9 months before the day that Dave Blood was born. He was born September 16th, 1956, same year.
Are you saying that Elvis was Dave Blood's father?
No.
9 months? I mean, I thought you were hinting at that.
No, I don't know what I'm thinking.
No.
I was thinking maybe Dave's parents were entertained by that performance. Maybe that's a stretch.
That's possible. My parents actually claim that although I was conceived, they would tell us what we were conceived to. My older sister was conceived to an Elvis song, and I was conceived to an early Motown song, and my younger sister also.
What? They knew that? Okay.
My parents were very, very forward about a lot of stuff. I think it's why my marriage has lasted so long. Very affectionate with each other.
No, that's a very long shot. I just noticed that recently, the timeline there. But yeah, I think that's my reasoning, is that
that's like was it there a National Lampoon many years ago had a piece called "I Am Elvis's Illegitimate Child Too," and this guy figured out that when Elvis was 14, he passed to his hometown. It's like, how could my mother resist the charms of the future king of rock and roll? Question for you, Joe. Was that before or after the Ed Sullivan appearance?
Oh, it was before. In fact,
before, yeah.
Ed Sullivan wouldn't have them, but the thing that I think spurred Ed Sullivan to get them on his show was that the Steve Allen show was put on the same night as the Ed Sullivan show, and Steve Allen got Elvis on because of the controversy, because he knew it could be huge ratings, and it was right after he was on Milton Berle, and that was probably even more controversial than the stage shows, maybe because of the audience that Milton had, and he did a lot of the lusty gyrations on that show, maybe even more lustfully.
Lusty gyrations.
I don't know.
I just love hearing you say lusty gyration.
No, I don't know. Well, he had the nickname Elvis the Pelvis because of that. But Steve Allen did it. He had him with the hound dog, which I guess Elvis hated that.
Yeah, that is, he made him wear tux.
It was kind of humiliating. But then once he saw that his ratings, he got beat. He said, "Yeah, we'll have Elvis on." But every time that Elvis would move his hips, the camera would not shoot up, would switch to one camera that was static on on his head.
Every time he would do his lusty gyrations.
Yeah.
Um,
Which
yeah,
they don't seem that bad to us in this day and age.
no. Well, we lived through Prince. There's some lusty gyrations for you. We people our age, if we like Elvis at all, and younger people, we kind of like him sort of ironically, or we kind of forget. My parents used to always say Elvis changed the world. They said there was the world before Elvis and the world they lived in after Elvis. Like we can't imagine like what it was like for folks like my parents. And I've talked about before, they were dancers on Bandstand. My father had the pompadour, the Elvis look, the leather jacket. And if you don't believe me, we could ask my dad now. He laughed at that. Yeah, it completely changed the world for them. Rock and roll, or as Mitch McConnell calls it, Negro noise, changed my parents' lives. And they said that nothing, once Elvis appeared, nothing was the same. They divided everything. And they were in that right age group. They were in their early teens just as he came on the scene. I remember my parents telling me about people they knew, a new Elvis movie had come out, and their friends of theirs were going on their honeymoon. And that's what they did for their honeymoon. The first thing they did was go to see the Elvis movie. Of course, now that we know the effect that Elvis's lustful gyrations have on the human libido, well, you can understand why you want to start your honeymoon off with an Elvis movie. So, yeah, I concur with you, Joe. Elvis was probably, you could probably argue, probably the most important musical thing to happen in America ever. After Klaus Nomi.
Right.
And the one that I'm going to talk about.
Okay.
Endings. So the one I wanted to talk about. Oh, were you done, Joe?
Yes.
Right.
He said lustful gyrations 7 times. If he says it one more time, we have to film him from the neck up.
So I wanted to talk about the Cramps at the Napa State Hospital in 1978. I think it's June 1978. Cramps are from New York City, and as Lex Interior claims in the video, they drove 3,000 miles to play for them. A band called the Mutants was also on the bill. I was given a VHS copy of this tape when I was in high school by my cousin Tim. And I had listened to the Cramps a little bit, but once I saw that, I was blown away because, first of all, it's on like really early video, so it's black and white. Kind of adds to like the creepiness of it. But the people in the hospital, like, they get up on stage, they're singing along, or they're screaming, or not really singing along, they're like screaming, or it actually just looks like a really good time. And I guess the reason I think it's iconic is, as far as I know, nothing really like that had happened before. I know like punk bands would play like interesting places, but to play at like a state hospital in the psychiatric ward, I don't know. I think it's cool because I think a lot of people just kind of that live there kind of get forgotten, and for the bands to come and play for them, like, it was probably really special for them. And it was probably felt like an adventure for the bands playing, to play something like that. So yeah, I just think, and I think that kind of, like, they were somewhat known, definitely on the East Coast, but it's not like that like skyrocketed them to fame, which I think is even cooler about it. But it has become this kind of like epic little show that they did for free at a state hospital. So yeah, I would recommend checking it out if you haven't.
I always get mad when I see these lists of great guitarists and Poison Ivy Rorschach isn't on the list. She should be on the list of great guitarists.
And just coolest looking people, because the entire time she's like chewing gum and just kind of like scanning the room.
Now that
Brian Gregory, the guitar player, he's like shouting backing vocals. He's got like cigarettes and he's just kind of But yeah, the way that like the people were like one guy was like pretending to sing along, and he was letting them take the microphone. And he says, what does he say? Oh, they say you people are crazy, but I just don't know. You seem all right to me.
Yeah, they actually didn't drive 3,000 miles. They had another show out there that gotten canceled, so that show came about.
Yeah, they weren't even originally supposed
yeah.
to play. It was a band called the Ready Maids or something.
Now, I am going to argue with the iconic nature because I claim that up until 2022, maybe 12 people and a donkey named Colin knew who the Cramps were. And then in 2022, episode 4 of Wednesday, it happens. Jenna Ortega does the dance. Jenna Ortega does the dance to Goo Goo Muck. And somebody once said, Jenna Ortega put more work into that dance than the Cramps did into their cover of Goo Goo Muck. But that literally changed everything. Little kids, I was at Punk Rock Flea Market and Goo Goo Muck came on and all these little kids began doing the dance. Like I say, it's Jenna Ortega should be considered like the fifth member of the Cramps, or well, they've been through a lot of members, but Jenna Ortega brought the Cramps into people's realization. I can find, there's a video of one little girl doing that dance exactly, and I think it's iconic because it created an actual new generation of creepy kids. You know, the creepy kids had gone away. Hipsters hate creepiness. And, you know, hipsters weren't having creepy kids. And it's great now. If I go to, I went to a dark market at a cemetery, and there were always like normal parents who had little creepy kids who apparently have become creepy kids through watching Wednesday and hearing that song. And they're like dragging their parents out to this. Yeah, I think it's just that performance is iconic. It is so amazing. You watch it again and again, and you get chills. Jenna Ortega is so in the moment there that it is shocking. It's the perfect song, meets the perfect actress, the perfect dance, and it's great because it made a lot of people who didn't know about the Cramps discover the Cramps. I've heard people complain about it, you know, like, well, my kids know about the Cramps because I taught them good music, not because they heard it on a TV show. I'm like, shut the fuck up. You have no right. I have a right to complain. I've earned my right to complain. You people have no right to complain, okay? You know, I'm glad little kids like the Cramps, and I'm glad a lot of these little girls are going to be like, wait a minute, that's a woman playing the guitar. I can do this too. So I will give major props to Jenna Ortega for what she did. So Jenna, you're not watching, but you know, here we go. All right, Dean, take us home, unless we start to run over, in which case.
Sure. So this one I'm going to talk about is very well documented. There's even a full-length film about it and lots of hand-wringing articles that you can read online about it. And of course, I'm talking about the Rolling Stones playing at Altamont. So here's the setup. On December 6th of 1969, the Stones are finishing up a tour, and they've agreed to play a set at what some people were calling the Woodstock West. And it was going to be Santana, the Flying Burrito Brothers, Jefferson Airplane, and Crosby, Stills, and Nash. And actually, the Grateful Dead were supposed to be on, but we'll talk about them in a bit. It was at a free concert. It was going to be a free concert at a speedway in Northern California called the Altamont Speedway. This was a location that was found just days before the concert. They were trying to hold it in San Francisco at various places, and they couldn't get the permits. And so they had to move it to this speedway. Someone had the bright idea to hire the Hells Angels as security for $500 of free beer, which in today's money would be about a little over $4,000. And the Grateful Dead actually were one of the folks involved in organizing it. And they didn't even play the show due to the chaos that was happening all during the day during the show. There were about 300,000 people there. Remember, it's a free concert. People were just coming out in droves to this. So anyway, the Stones headlined the show. And it was kind of getting dark. And during their third song, Sympathy for the Devil, a fight erupted in front of the crowd, right at the foot of the stage. Now, I'll mention that the stage wasn't even like a proper stage. There was no security fence or anything. It was only about 3 or 4 feet off the ground that the bands were performing. And basically, the Hells Angels were just sitting on the edge of the stage all around, trying to keep people from getting on the stage. So there was during that song, the third song of their set, there was a big fight in the front, and the Stones had to actually stop playing, and the Hells Angels like restored order, probably by hitting people over the head. And then the Stones started playing again, and they basically finished their set. But what happened during the second to last song, which was Under My Thumb, it was at this point that some of the Hells Angels got into a scuffle with a gentleman named Meredith Hunter, who was 18. He was attempting to get on stage with other fans, and one of the Hells Angels grabbed his head and punched him and pushed him back in the crowd. A little later, this Meredith Hunter, returned to the stage area, and his girlfriend apparently was trying to calm him down and move him further back into the crowd. But he was reportedly, quote, enraged, irrational, and so high he could barely walk. And what happened was...
Mick Jagger.
Yeah, right. So at this time, if you look at the concert footage, Hunter is seen in the concert wearing a sort of lime green suit. He's now at the front of the stage, and he pulls out a .22 caliber revolver from inside of his jacket. And a Hells Angel named Alan Pissarro, seeing Hunter draw the revolver, pulled a knife from his belt and ran into the crowd and basically, chopped the gun out of his hand and stabbed him at least twice. I think the autopsy said he was stabbed like 6 times, and he killed him. Meanwhile, the Stones are still playing. And from what I've read, they didn't even know what happened until after the concert. The gun was recovered and turned over to the police, and Hunter's autopsy did confirm that he was on meth when he died. And the Hells Angel Pissarro was arrested and tried for murder 2 years later, but he was acquitted by the jury because they looked at the concert footage and showed that Meredith Hunter was brandishing a gun, and so he was acquitted on the ruling of self-defense. So the reason I bring this concert up is because some people talk about this sort of like the end of the 60s counterculture and the end of the hippie movement. So Woodstock represented sort of the peace and love 1960s. And by 1969, this concert happens and things get real. Now, I will mention that some people also say that the Manson murders happened before this, which some people say sort of signaled the end of the hippie movement. But I think this is kind of an important turning point for the 60s hippie counterculture and that kind of movement. So the entire concert was caught on documentary film. There's a film called Gimme Shelter out there, which some of you may have already seen. It's actually, you can rent it on Amazon Prime right now and watch the whole thing. I'll have a link to the trailer. And it was actually a concert film being filmed for the Stones' whole tour. It just happened that they were there for this concert at the end of the tour. Fun fact, which I read, which I cannot confirm, is the credited camera operators for Altamont included a young George Lucas at the concert. But apparently what happened was his camera jammed and he only shot like 100 feet of film, and none of his footage was used in the final film. Anyway, so I'm throwing out the Rolling Stones Altamont concert sort of as a tide turning end of the 60s. Here we go into the bad old 70s movement in history.
The film he did shoot was still better than the prequels that he released.
Right.
Dean talked about the two things that ended the 60s, the Manson murders and Altamont. Kenneth Anger was part of both. Kenneth Anger was there filming for the Stones film, but he also knew Bobby Beausoleil. Bobby Beausoleil had been in Lucifer Rising. Bobby Beausoleil was a member of the Manson family who kicked off all of that. Kenneth Anger had also rented a house and lived at the house of Jack Parsons, who, of course, blew himself up. He did the whole Babylon Rising thing, where he tried to bring about the Antichrist by having sex with Marjorie Cameron, who was Kenneth Anger's muse. The person who also lived there and who was the scribe for that was L. Ron Hubbard. Charles Manson took Scientology classes when he was in prison. So now we're tying Charles Manson to L. Ron Hubbard and to Kenneth Anger. Of course, Kenneth Anger and Jack Parsons were acolytes of one Alistar Crowley. Alistar Crowley appears on the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper album, which is supposedly the height of the 60s, but Charles Manson also fascinated by the Beatles. And one theory is that this was a magical working to close some gateways, but to also make room for darker rock stars. Because after this comes your David Bowie, who, of course, is a follower and knows a lot about Alistar Crowley. Jimmy Page, who eventually contributes to the Lucifer Rising soundtrack. Of course, Kenneth Anger right there. Your Ozzy Osbourne, who does a song, Mr. Crowley. So if you want to get really weird, down a really weird rabbit hole, I would recommend the Kenneth Anger Ending the 60s rabbit hole. Folks, now that I've sufficiently freaked you out, it's time for recommendations, in which I will freak you out a little bit more by first recommending The Old Woman of Haunted House. This is a radio play from Judson Fountain from I don't know when. It just kind of it crept out the devil's butt. It's really weird. I recommended it. I do 31 Days of Halloween where I recommend stuff, and literally nobody listened to it or got back to me on it. I'm hoping you folks will. About a minute and 45 seconds into it, there's a little bit of the play, then an announcer comes in and they go back to play, and the announcer says that Mr. Fountain would like to thank listeners of all races, even our Puerto Rican listeners. And you're like, oh dear God, oh dear God, no, he means well is all I can say. Yeah, and that is just the tip of the iceberg of the weirdness of this one. I wouldn't be surprised if I found out Kenneth Anger and Charles Manson were involved. All right, it's time for me to get the Impossible Box. Yay! So I can do a recommendation. Now, I realize I've been mentioning the Impossible Box without mentioning the song Impossible Box. So there's a song by a band called iVardensphere called The Impossible Box. I hate to recommend old stuff. This came out in 2013, but damn it, it still holds up. And it's one of the biggest earworms of all time ever. You'll be walking around the house going, Pandora's box was just Pandora having a real good time. You can't get it out of your head once you hear it. So iVardensphere Impossible Box. Now it's time to reach into the Impossible Box and pick your horror movie for this week. And let me put that back over here. Hope I have enough light to read this by. I might not. Hang on. Here we go. What do we got here? Oh, this is a good one. This week's recommendation is Horror Express with Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee on a train. It is fantastic, and it includes the great line, how do I know you're not neither of you is the monsters? And they say, we can't be, we're British. So it is a really, really good, it's so good that Dana Gould made another version of it for Creepshow, where the guy he appears in Barbarian, but also in Idiocracy. He goes, why come you have no tattoo? That guy, where he travels into the movie Horror Express. So there you go. Those are my 3 recommendations.
Great. I'm going to recommend a docudrama from 1981 called This Is Elvis. It was a theatrical release. And multiple people played Elvis in the drama part, but there was a lot of footage that had the real Elvis in it too, and you get to see some of those snippets of some of the TV shows I talked about earlier, and then also other live appearances by the real Elvis, and you can hear how great his voice actually is. Unironically, he had an awesome voice. And I also want to recommend some video I found on YouTube of Elvis performing on his 4th appearance on the stage show, which is just a beautiful performance. And also, it's a song I Was the One. It was one of his singles, I think. And the lyrics are a little, I don't know, but the performance is great. And also the 2nd appearance, I think it was the 2nd, February 11th, on stage show is on YouTube. You can watch his rendition of Heartbreak Hotel, which is interesting because it's not just him and his band, but the whole time the Dorsey Brothers band backs him up. And it's sort of like a weird foreshadowing of maybe his Vegas days where he has a big orchestra. But this is a little bit different. It's a little clunkier, but it's still cool to see. Near the end of it, Elvis, I guess, sort of improvises or something, but the band and changes the beat, but the band can't keep up with that, and they're offbeat, and it's kind of funny, but it's kind of cool too to hear them playing on the upbeats, the downbeats the wrong way, and I don't know, it's just kind of neat. So check them out.
Which one of those two has the best lustful gyrations?
Well, I Was the One is a ballad, and they're both ballads, so they don't really have them. But
So
you
they're
can see them.
chock-full
You can see them
lustful
in This Is Elvis movie.
I'd like to recommend something I think I've recommended before. It's water. And you know what? Take the label off your water. You're not advertising for anybody. Just because it's not hot anymore doesn't mean you don't need to drink water.
The Earth is 2/3 water, which means that if you were to lay dollar bills around the equator, 2/3 of them would sink.
So yeah,
Are you done, Dan?
that's it. Drink water.
Good advice. I am going to recommend a YouTube video, well, a channel called Stuff Made Here. It's run by a fellow named SHEN, who's a insanely smart engineer. And he has lots of really cool power tools in his workshop. He just got a ginormous water jet milling machine, which is pretty amazing. Rodney, I think you could do some pretty dangerous things with this thing. Anyway, his latest video is about making pencil sharpeners. Now that sounds kind of weird, but it's really about, he wants you to think about different ways to think about how to solve the same problem. And he makes 6 ridiculous pencil sharpeners. But I think it's a entertaining video. Just check it out. He's got a lot of really cool videos. He does a lot of CAD drawing and explains how he does stuff, and he makes these insane inventions, all while using his engineering skills. Check it out. Stuff Made
Under
Here.
my deformed thumb. He sharpens the pencil and stabs the guy in Stone's concert. While doing lustful gyrations. Bring it all home, people. Bring it all home. All right. Okay.
Klaus Nomi watches.
I'm done. I'm finished. All right. I'll see everybody later.